And now, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce, from California, in her premier debut at the Circle Center, Alisa Genovese. The topic that she is discussing, which is a very deep one, and one of long-standing importance, is under one umbrella, one avatar, different approaches. So would you give her a hand, please? Because
thank you all for coming and hearing. I know can be a topic that many people have a lot of different viewpoints on and feelings about, but I'm going to try to make this as palatable and understandable as possible, and hopefully as hopeful as possible for all of you to, as a community, to think about and consider having further conversations about. So I'm seeing this as just sort of an icebreaker of this topic. I'd like to start out today with a quote from Baba, and have us maybe take a minute to just call Baba's presence in. I am equally approachable to one and all, big and small, to saints who rise and sinners who fall, through all the various paths that give the divine call. I am approachable alike to saint whom I adore, and to sinner who I am for, and equally through Sufism, Vedantism, Christianity, or Zoroastrianism and Buddhism, and all other isms of any kind, and also directly through no medium of isms at all. So in thinking about that quote, I'd like us all to just close our eyes and take a minute to just call Baba's presence in into just in any way that you can, and let's remember that all of this, Baba is behind all of this in one way or another, and this is truly all his work. Jai Meher Baba.
Jai Baba.
So before I begin my talk, I want to start out with a few disclaimers of my own. I appreciate your introduction, Dennis. But I want to say that first and foremost, I'm not a public speaker, and this is my very first PowerPoint. So I'm going to do my best to stick to the PowerPoint. I may sort of lose it at some point and give up the whole thing at some point, but I'm going to try to stick with it. But what brings me here primarily, first and foremost, is Meher Baba. And I will be sharing with you all some of what has brought me to be sitting here before you. It's been quite a journey over the last couple of years. But clearly what has been abundantly clear to me is that Meher Baba has prompted me to do this and to step up and speak about this issue, which I think in part has to do with the fact that I have some skills. I don't know why he chose me, but here I am. But I want to just say, in terms of disclaimers, I personally have no history with the Sufis in the sense of I've never had any personal interaction with them. I've never met even any of the Murshids. I've never been, twice I've only been out to their centers, but that was when Bao was visiting and we got invited. So this isn't personal to me in any way, and I feel this is an important issue, and I feel like I want to step up and speak about it, but it's also very vulnerable. So everything that I'm going to be saying today is either based on the history itself or representative of only my point of view. I'm not speaking for anybody except myself, and for all of you to just consider the things that I've come to in understanding this issue. And it's all on all of you to make your own decisions about this history. So please know that I'm not trying to convince anybody. I don't have any mission here other than to share what I've experienced. So on that note, I will, my hopes and intentions for this program are to help create ease and safety around defining differences and understanding this complex history. so as to enable clearer and more peaceful boundaries to arise and healing to occur. To begin to work toward defining the direct approach for current and future purposes, while accepting and respecting Sufi Baba Lover path as a brethren path with a very different approach. A place where both sides can take responsibility for their part and to work to mutually respect these differences and boundaries therein. No small job. So again, in the time I have to present today, I'm not expecting miracles in terms of any solutions, and I don't have any answers or solutions, but I just have some thoughts on the subject. So the agenda for today is I'm going to talk about how I came to be involved in this and to tell the story of what happened in Berkeley in 2015 when we had a big weekend conference about this issue. I'm going to give a brief timeline of the history between the two Meher Baba communities, and I'm going to be talking about exploring the differences, the need to begin to clarify and define the direct approach and establish clear boundaries, and then finally I'm hoping that we can explore paths to peaceful coexistence and learning through the oppositions and future possibilities between the two communities. And again, those are going to definitely require more conversations beyond today. So I'm going to start out with talking about what happened and how I came to be here. And whenever I think of this part, I'm always reminded of how Robert Dreyfus, because for those of you, oh wait a minute, for those of you who don't know that I was married to Robert Dreyfus for 21 years, and part of Robert's story was always that he had this long, arduous journey to meeting Meher Baba, and when he finally arrived after such a journey to Meherazad, he was sitting on the bench waiting, and Erich came out and said, he came and sat next to him and said, "Hello, brother, my name is Erich." And he said, "Tell me what brings you to be sitting on this bench." So in that spirit, I'm going to be sharing with you what brings me to be sitting on this chair. So it started, I have been living in Berkeley, been living in close proximity to the Sufi community for over 30 years. And for the most part, in all my time, I know nothing. I knew before getting involved with this, I tell you, I knew nothing. Even though I was married to Robert, I knew pretty much nothing about this history until I got involved. So I lived among the Sufis, and it was, we basically really never saw them. They lived in Walnut Creek. We had our own group. We had two separate groups. And as far as I had ever witnessed, there was no animosity that I ever witnessed between whenever Sufis would come into our group. They were always welcomed. They were always, treated well. So I just never thought about it. They were mostly doing their own thing with Jim Mackay in those years. And so then, but then it wasn't until the late 90s or mid to late 90s when Bao started coming that he would bring the groups together to work for his visits, because Bao liked everything in grand style, and basically the Baba community, as far as I understood, couldn't really handle that level of organization. So the Sufis were brought in, and that was the first interaction I had ever had with working with them. And it was fine, nobody talked about anything, and so that was kind of the sense that the communities were somehow coming together, that I think started to form an idea to people in the community. So then fast forward to 2013 when some of the Sufis, I'm not sure when Carol Connor became Murshida, but I know that shortly in 2013 there were some members of the Sufi community, more and more, after Bao passed, we would see some of the Sufis more often. They would come to meetings and whatnot. And there was some members in our community who were in both communities, and this was sort of like they had a foot in both worlds, and they were working with our group, and I was involved with a couple of them doing some forgiveness work in the community, and I didn't know anything. I didn't know they were also involved with the Sufi group. They were very beloved members of our community, and at that time, there was also a young Baba lover in our community who was very friendly with the Sufi community and invited Khalid Shafa to come and speak at our center. And that was the first awareness I had of some rumbling going on. And I was like, okay, what's going on? So Khalid Shafa came to speak at our center, and there was a lot of people in the community who were feeling rather uncomfortable with this. I was at the presentation. It was a little odd for me, but he was, I didn't get anything, understand anything at that point. So what happened there was people started feeling like the blending is starting to happen too much. So there was some people that were getting a little concerned. And then at that time, the Baba lovers who were involved in our community, who were Sufis, nominated a Sufi to our board. And the nominating committee turned them down. And that was when the earthquake started to go. And so the people who nominated really complained and said, you can't say no to us. There's nothing in your bylaws that say that we can't be on your board. Well, the nominating committee immediately, the board immediately formed a committee to revise the bylaws. And this is where it all began. Because they said, okay, maybe they're right, and we have to really look at this issue. So Baba prompting me, I happened to be on the board at that time. So I was like, okay, what's going on here? And so I joined the committee because I wanted to understand this history. I thought this is important. So then I was sitting on the fence. I was thinking, why are we being exclusionary? I don't really understand. And then the member who invited Khalid Shafa got really upset by this consideration of the bylaw revision, and he posted this post on Facebook that said to write letters to the board, against this bylaw revision, and we're being exclusionary as a community, and I don't want to be part of that. Anyway, that post was tagged. People were tagged, I think he tagged people all over the world, Baba lovers all over the world. And that Facebook post generated over 2,000 comments. And truly that's when I started, because I was hearing from the community, why are people bringing up this history? It's dead and buried. It should be forgotten now, and bow, we're all coming together again and all of this. And so I started reading the posts on that Facebook, the comments, and they were vehement. It was like Baba ripped off the Band-Aid or lanced the wound, and feelings were coming out left and right, from both sides, Sufis and Baba lovers alike. And I, being a therapist, I was like, this doesn't look like it's dead and buried to me. I was kind of like, this looks juicy. This is going to be where Baba's going to do some work. So meanwhile, I thought to myself, okay, I have to take it upon myself to understand more. So that's how Baba got me hooked in. Also, the fact that I was on the board, letters started coming in, and I was talking to another co-board member, and I said, we have, as a board, we have to respond to these letters, and I do believe that we need to maybe do an education meeting about this history, so people who don't understand it could make an honest decision about the bylaw. And so that's how the conference started. We decided, me and Lisa Greenstein was the other woman, we decided, let's do it like a 2 or 3 hour meeting and just do a timeline of the history and explain what's the background so people can know. Well, that started, so just at that time, we were starting to work on that. Suddenly, out of the blue, I get an email from a man named Clive Adams, who I did not know. I mean, I knew who he was, but I didn't know him. And I was like, how does he get my email? And he sends me an email. He doesn't know anything going on in our community, asking me if I had any documents from Robert Dreyfus's estate regarding his time with, when he was living in India in 1980, working with Erich when he was drafting that letter, if I had any information about that, because he was working on a project where he was collecting information about this history. So I was like, okay, Baba, that's a coincidence. So I said, hey, we're doing this meeting. Would you be interested in joining in? And at the same time, Clive also had contacted Ursula van Buskirk, who had a file that Erich had given her back in the 80s called the Wolf and Sheep file. And Erich had been given that to Ursula and Ed van Buskirk and said, you may need this in Berkeley someday, you hold on to this. And Ursula had sat on that for 35 years, waiting for somebody to ask her about it because she didn't know what to do with it. And So that file is what we see a lot of what's on Merit Legacy, was a lot of the letters and whatnot were in that file. So Ursula felt like, wow, this is, somebody finally wants this file, and so this is how Baba brought all the forces together. And the evening meeting turned into first a half-day event, then a full-day event, and then before you know it, we had a whole weekend event. And I will just say about the conference, it's all up on Merit Legacy website. You can all look at it. But what I can say about the conference is it was the most potent Baba work I have ever done. I had never, I mean, I tell you this so truthfully, I had never experienced Baba taking the wheel of something to that effect. I mean, all of us who got involved in the conference, it could not believe the immensity of what was happening. It was like the floodgates opened, and every day people were contacting with information, stories, anger, pushback, concerns, and it was just like pandemonium. And I somehow was in the middle of organizing this and being the facilitator for the event, and being a liaison to the board, because believe it or not, we had to get the board to pay for this. And there were a lot of people on the board who were like, very against it. So I had to be my most diplomatic self and translate what was going on here to here. So that's how it came to be. And Baba, by hook or by crook, Baba had his way, and that conference happened. And it kept getting, snowballing into bigger and bigger areas, and Baba's Last Warning became part of it. Mera Ajani came all the way from India for 4 days to present on Baba's Last Warning, which I highly recommend anybody listening to. It was so powerful. And as a matter of fact, it was the last thing that Mera Ajani did before she had her stroke. She was very much supportive of this education going out and this information. And I tell you, it was spiritual training. It was such an ego grind to be part of this. I just got ground to dust. But what I did see in the conference was that indeed the issue was not dead and buried, and that it was actually very healing. The conference was very healing for our community, because what people were speaking about what had not been spoken about for 35 years. And there was so much suppression around this issue. And it was healing to many, and I could say that what I saw was that there were wounds on both sides. That a lot of people had been very affected and wounded by stuff that happened with the Sufis, and then the Sufis were very wounded by feeling judged by what we were saying and all of this. But it was a two-sided deal. This was not a one-sided deal, and that, and so I felt that. That's part of what this is about, it's about healing. So what I came to understand about the conference, and what I still, it goes on for me, and I even just in preparing for this talk, more and more of it has been coming together. But at the end of the conference, what I saw was that the conference wasn't the end of something. Rather, it was just the beginning. And the issues addressed around the differences remain a work in progress for Baba communities, and that's part of why I'm here talking to you all today, because I think this is a really important thing. And as I said, there was absolutely no doubt to me that this was Baba's work. And I don't know what it's all about. I can't say, but I just know he's insistent on this. So I've come to believe that the differences between the two communities and approaches to him may be an important part of Baba's advent and work in the future. I started to the contrary of like, oh, let's sweep this under the carpet, it's dead and buried. It's like what I'm starting to see and understand more and more, that actually I do think this plays a significant role in Baba's advent. This history is there, and how we deal with this history is part of something he's doing in the work with oppositions. So I really do believe that, and I'll talk more about that. It turned out that it was more about clarifying the direct approach to him than it was about the Sufis and what they were doing. It's between them and Baba. Yet the need to heal and have agreed parameters was clear for future peace. What I mean by that was that I really felt like in the beginning I was trying really hard to be the facilitator and make sure that, you know, everybody was fairly somehow represented, and like, you know, the people's feelings about the Sufis could be something people could hear and whatnot. But then I started to really get, especially when Baba's Last Warning came in, and the conference title, which was the Resonating Bell of Warning, which we grappled over for a really long time, but that one was the clear one that Baba wanted, that it was really about the direct approach. It was like Baba was ringing the gong for all of us on the direct approach to him. So it felt like by the end, we have a lot to wake up to and pay attention to. And yes, so that's what I just said. So that it was about for us to pay attention. And now that all the Mandali are gone and we find ourselves in the unshaded sun, it's about learning how to rely solely upon him, heeding and living his words. That's what it felt like to me, like we now have to really walk the talk, essentially. It was about the responsibility to uphold and appreciate the immensity of what he has given us by keeping this direct approach alive and universal for future generations of his lovers. It was about Baba's last warning to us on the direct approach. I saw the thing that also became really clear, and I really got this through Mera Ajani's presentation too, was that we don't have a guaranteed hold on him. Like we take for granted that we do, and we all sort of believe that. I mean, before all this, I never gave a thought to Baba's last warning because I thought I'd never lose hold of Baba. You know, I have nothing to worry about. Wrong. I really got that we actually, that's the effort we have to make, is to hold fast to him, hold tight to him, and especially during this time where the umbrella is starting to spin faster and faster. And then this is what, since the conference, I mean the conference, when I think about the timing of the conference, it was really the precipice of a huge change that the world, that we have seen in the last couple of years. I mean, it really, I feel like Baba was ringing the gong just at that moment where, pay attention, the umbrella's going to start spinning real fast now. And so, you know, that's where, you know, when I was sitting here thinking about how do I name what I'm going to say here, I sat with Baba and the umbrella came to me. I got that from Baba totally. I sat and I just said, that's it. And now, as I was preparing for this, I realized the umbrella is the theme of this talk. That as Baba had said, and I never did find the quote that in 1932, I think Baba was the East-West Gathering. That's when Baba said that about the umbrella spinning faster and faster, and that 62, those who don't
62, not 32.
62. What did I say?
32.
62. That those who do not have a firm, that he said during that time that it would be easier than you think to lose hold of my Daman, and that, you know, that the umbrella would be spinning faster and faster, and those who do not have a firm grip will fly off like raindrops on the water, so on the top of the umbrella. So I do feel like that came through very strongly in the conference. So I'm gonna now just shift gears and give you a little bit of a historical overview for those of you here who don't know that much about the history, just so we have it. I'm not a historian, but I did write up a timeline, and I actually sent it to Erich Adams, who then corrected a few things, and so I'm just going to go ahead and read this. So it begins with Rabia Martin. She was rejected from the Inayat Khan order, and she encounters Baba through Norina. Ivy, but she never meets Baba. She passes away because she had cancer, so she doesn't meet Baba, but Ivy, her successor, Ivy Deuce, makes contact with Baba, and then Baba takes on her order and reorients it toward him. Baba makes clear that Ivy is not enlightened. Baba says he will work through her, providing she was 100% honest and makes no claims that she is spiritually advanced. During the drafting of the charter, which Ivy and Don Stevens were involved with, There were many accounts of Ivy pleading with Baba to promise Deluman Murshids for her order. The story reflects that Baba is very unclear on this point. It is fair to say that another unbiased historical account about this exists. Baba warned Ivy against astrology and other forms of occultism. After Baba drops the body, Ivy, delving into the occult and in her book, How a Master Works, claims that Baba did promise her this unbroken chain of illumined Murshids for 700 years. Baba is not around to corroborate. No documents corroborate. All other people, including Mandali members who were present at the time of her request, disagree with Ivy's claim. This, to me, becomes the first divide between the two communities. By the early 70s, her murids begin to take all that Ivy Deuce is saying as if directly from Baba. Ivy leaned on and encouraged psychics and astrologers and other forms of occultism despite Baba's orders. Murids, including Lud Dimphal, claim to all that Ivy was infallible. This becomes the second divide. In 1979, it becomes apparent that Ivy appoints Jim Mackay as her successor, though this was denied by the 5 Sufis in October 1980 to the Mandali. Ivy tells people, including Mani, that she is convinced Mackay is on the 6th plane. Mackay, now being commonly believed to be a 6th plane, illumined one, declares Ivy is also on the 6th plane. The Murids are thrilled to have 2 6th-planers accept that Ivy says what Ivy says and are prepared to follow Mackay. Meanwhile, neither Ivy nor Mackay claimed illumination for themselves, technically, but as an organization, this was clearly supported and never refuted. In 1980, the Mandali are growing more concerned about the direction Sufism Re-Oriented is going, and after receiving many concerned letters from Sufis and hearing first-hand accounts from all quarters of Sufism Re-Oriented, Erich feels prompted by Baba to write a letter to Ivy, warning her off the current course with James Mackay. In response, Ivy sends 5 Sufi representatives to respond to a letter, since Baba told her never to defend herself. Those meetings are taped, and they're on the Mayor Legacy site. Mandali respond from love and concern to their Sufi brothers and sisters to beware of false masters as per Baba's last warning. The Sufis defend Mackay and deny all allegations leveled against Mackay and current Sufism Re-Oriented events and reject the Mandali's warnings and choose to follow Mackay. Erich sends out 2 follow-up public letters to clarify that the Mandali do not support seeking out other masters and warning against those who claim spiritual authority or infallibility, specifically James Mackay. He states that the Mandali will no longer speak on the matter. This is the third divide. Under Mackay, they respond to the Mandali in a booklet called Sufism Speaks Out, which was published and handed out publicly at their information meetings. The Mandali withdrew from any further attempts to dissuade Sufism Re-Oriented and continued to lovingly accept them whenever they came, but they never sent anybody to join Sufism Re-Oriented again. Mani felt strongly that Sufism Re-Oriented should keep their practices to themselves and not to pull members from the larger Baba community. Over time, various Mandali accepted invitations by Sufism to give talks and trade films and good wishes. The Mandali did not express hate, exclusion, or animosity toward any Sufis. They simply were very concerned about the dangers of those who claim spiritual authority, who are not themselves God-realized, and didn't condone that practice. But they always loved and welcomed any and all seekers to Baba's home in Myrtle Beach and in India. So I was just going to say, actually, one of the things I forgot to say in the beginning of this presentation is I know this is going to generate a lot of thoughts and feelings and questions, and because I want to get through this particular first part of my thing, I gave everybody paper and pens, so if you could write down your questions, and then I will, at the end, after the break, I'm going to take all questions and we're going to have conversations.
I just have a point of correction on your first point.
Sure.
Ada Martin was never thrown out as a Sufis.
No, she wasn't.
And I spoke to Piblai Khan about this very issue. He said that the entire Sufi world agreed, he told me this directly, that Ada Martin was Hazrat and Khan's rightful successor.
Uh-huh.
The only disagreement was that she was under the understanding that she was the successor for the entire Western world, and they believed she was only a successor for North American continent, and that there could be others on other continents. So, but they never rejected her. They all agreed she was an icon's choice.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, that's, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yes, she
Yeah,
was.
that's not so much reflected in the history that with Baba. Okay, so I'm going to go on. So that was the history that I gave. That's just, and I give, that history is really all just corroborated in the stuff that's available for anybody to look at and read, and you know, it's just sort of what it is. My ponderings on this history were something different. And I kind of, so these are what I'm going to share with you, are some of my thoughts about what this might be about for the larger Baba community. So from my thoughts, there's nothing in his advent that is insignificant. I mean, I really have thought, like, how unbelievable, having witnessed the amount of information that was coming at us, that it felt like everything that Baba did had significance, every little thing. Like Arnavas used to say, not a leaf moves without his wish and will. So I started to think, this history is so well documented. I don't believe that's a coincidence in Baba's advent. So perhaps there's something for us to know and understand because it plays a role in his work going forward. Perhaps this history holds a lot for all of us to ponder for years to come. Baba himself started this first sect of Sufism Re-Oriented, and the two groups have now become separate paths, as we see by clearly documented divides. The road to that separation is amply well documented. Perhaps in this Advent we have an opportunity. I mean, and I say opportunity because I think it's really is our choice, really, an opportunity to create something different in the relationship between these two approaches. Maybe an important learning is here for all of us as we grapple with that opposition. Perhaps his advent is not about another religion, since Baba himself stressed that he had come to do away with all rites, rituals, religious ceremonies, and traditions, and bring all religions together like beads on one string. He said that was his mission to the West. His mission was universality and the development of intuition for the new humanity. How can we acknowledge and keep alive this approach? Baba said, I came across this and I liked it because it seems so pertinent to what we're talking about. My work will arouse great enthusiasm and a certain amount of opposition. This is inevitable. But spiritual work is strengthened by opposition, and so it will be with mine. It is like shooting an arrow from a bow. The more you pull the bowstring toward you, the swifter the arrow speeds to its goal. So I see this history as something to this effect, that there is a certain amount of, certainly a certain amount of enthusiasm and you know, rise that comes from it, which Baba loved. He loved that masala. And there's a certain amount of opposition. I'd say quite a bit of oppositional views and feelings. And this, I think, is what, you know, where Baba's going to really work on all of us. So I just feel like maybe this is something that we all need to really learn about. So I'll sum up the key differences that I've come to understand, and I think these differences are what creates the conflicts of interest in terms of collaborating. I want to say that I don't believe that we ultimately, as two separate groups, can't ever collaborate, but I do think we have to really take seriously where the conflicts of interest may arise. So the one, of course, Sufism's collective belief in Baba's guaranteeing them an unbroken chain of illumined murshids till he comes again, as we can see in the history. There's another sort of perspective on that. Sufism's collective belief in Ivy Deuce's infallibility, which I do believe is going on still today in terms of the current murshids. And now these are the two differences that are obvious that we have seen, that we as Baba lovers can say that we have with Sufism Reoriented. But I realize that Baba's clear statements and warnings that no intermediaries are necessary in approaching him and can pose a spiritual danger to those on the direct path becomes a difference that they have with us. And I think this is a significant thing because, I heard during the conference a lot of, when we started bringing in Baba's last warning, which was, I was pulling my hair out of my head thinking, there's a lot going on here. But I started to realize that a lot of what we heard from the Sufis around it was that they felt that Baba's last warning didn't apply to them because of the charter, and frankly, I could understand that. I mean, that's their path. It's like, how could it would be a conflict of interest for them to think that Baba's last warning applied to them. So, but it does for those of us on the direct path, it certainly does apply to us. And that how we reconcile that difference, I think, is part of what we have to sort out in going through. So that becomes, I think, a really key difference between us in terms of because the truth of the matter is, for those of us on the direct path, anybody claiming spiritual authority and speaking on behalf of Baba will represent a conflict of interest for us in our hearts. That's just not. So when we talk about, and I'm going to talk more about this, but when we talk about creating harmony between the two groups or some sort of peaceful coexistence, I think we have to acknowledge where our parameters are, and that has to become something that's mutually accepted on both sides. It's going to take both sides really actually being able to create some sort of different thing than just what has happened in past, where there's wars waged in his name over these differences. So and I also want to just remember that, wait, hold on a second. A little confusing. Sorry. I just want to bring up the John Bass, the famous meeting between John Bass and Ivy Deuce, because I think that is Baba himself had said, that John Bass and Ivy Deuce were sort of, I think they were, asking Baba, how do we get members for our groups and who's, and Baba had made it very clear that people were to choose a group and stick with it and not go back and forth between the two groups, and that the two groups should remain separate. So, and I may, have that not totally correct, but I think that's okay. So, how you all doing? Are we doing okay? There's a lot of information here.
When you turn to look at your notes, your voice really
disappears.
So
I
maybe
know.
you can move the mic a little closer to the.
All right, I'll do my best. Maybe I'll try to pull this
closer. Yeah.
Okay, so in pondering, the history and the current narrative out there about the history, which sort of is the dominant narrative at this point about the illumined Murshids and all that, and there really isn't quite anything else that's there or sort of agreed upon. So I've been pondering very much the importance of a direct approach perspective on this history to sort of bring some another voice in the room and for the future really. And so what I have come to think about is that the history is what it is. I mean, it really is. It's all there, and anybody can take a look at it and make whatever they want of it. But it's there. It's neutral. The Sufis have an agreed upon interpretation of that history at this point. Baba lovers do not. And I do think that is important for the future. And I'll tell you why, because I feel like what's important about that is for all of us, maybe we can think, well, we have a handle on it, we understand. But you think, 1, 2, 3 generations forward, if there's nothing else going on but this, narrative about the Lumen Murshids and this unbroken chain and all of this, that what's to, Baba lovers in the future, if there isn't a sense of what this direct approach is all about? I mean, we don't have any authorities, right? There is no authorities there. So to have that not just disintegrate over time, because who wouldn't want to follow, you've got an illumined Murshid over there, Baba had said he's guaranteeing that till he comes again. It seems to me that this is more important for future than it is for us today. But what our work is today is to begin to generate that, what that path is about.
You're saying in the narrative.
Yes, in the
it's that
narrative.
Baba has said that, but you made clear that it's
their version.
It's what?
it's not clearly determined that that is what was said.
Probably
Yeah.
did not say that.
Yeah, right. And I think that's part of what the balance has to be here. Like, that has to be acknowledged. And what did Baba say? What did Baba say in terms of the directives for the direct approach?
The Sufi charter specifically refutes those first two key differences, the unbroken chain and that IBB Illuminate just refutes those two claims. I mean, so that we do have Baba's signed document refuting those 2 points.
The Sufi charter defutes the.
The Sufi charter that Baba signed refutes those 2 ideas. And we just need to read it, the plain sense of the words. If that was true, it would be in there, and it's not the opposite.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, there's enough out there to definitely refute these claims. But if that isn't brought forward, then, this is that's part of what I'm talking about. So another perspective already clearly exists naturally in this history and needs to be acknowledged. Not only needs to be acknowledged, but valued and stand firm. I think that there's a way in which it sort of somehow doesn't ever, people talk about it, but not, it isn't like just out there as an equally sort of valid,
Viewpoint.
version. And I think it needs to be acknowledged to break through some of the emotional charge and fear of judgment that currently exists around naming these differences. I mean, I don't know about in this community, but I know in the Berkeley Baba community, it was to a point where just any naming of this would just create, you're judging and you're, being exclusionary. And it was like, people were so like walking on eggshells, which actually now has gotten better. There's definitely a lot less eggshells going on. And I think that it's also needed to move past the good, bad, right, wrong polarities that we have going on today. I mean, I think it would balance those out, actually. On the direct path, our only concern needs to be how to draw closer to him and efface ourselves to the God-man directly. So I want to talk about the clear boundaries that can exist. Like, to me, these could be natural and clear boundaries. If the differences that are made clear through the history are what I see as natural boundaries, ones that exist without judgment, if we can define them. And when I was doing the conference, I was having a conversation with a Baba Lover who was, hesitant about the conference, but he said to me, basically, in essence, what you're trying to say is good fences make good neighbors. And I love that. To me, that sums it up. It's like, if we could build good fences, we could have a nice, be nice neighbors. So each one's relationship and path with Baba is unique and their own, and it isn't for anybody to judge. And I also feel like it's futile to deny any of these differences as well. So although we can't, it's not okay for us to judge, it's also not okay to deny the differences. I think that gets us equally into trouble. So the question is how to break through the polarities to peaceful coexistence. This is the biggest current challenge facing the Baba community in relationship to this issue. And I've been studying, one of the things I'll just say before, I didn't say that since the conference, after the conference I was sort of like every waking minute was devoted to the conference for 7 months, and suddenly I was like lost. I didn't know what to do with my life. I had put it on hold for so long. And I was cruising along and suddenly I had the inspiration to study mediation. I'm a psychotherapist and I've been doing it for like 30 years. And I had this sudden inspiration to study mediation. So I took the course in mediation and I've been practicing adding mediation practices to my practice for the last 1.5 years. And I've learned a lot about how to mediate between two opposing sides, and and I realized when it came time to do this talk that, maybe I was doing that for a reason, maybe I have something I can offer. But one of the things I've learned about mediation is that there's new ways of looking at holding these kinds of differences, and the old-fashioned top-down collaboration is outdated, where one side is right, the other side is wrong, the other side has to change, we don't have to change, it's their problem. That is kind of what we've been stuck in here, and that actually doesn't work. And so there's this form of we call stretch collaboration, which I have the book here, and I'll, if anybody wants to look at it at the break, where a man named Adam Kahane wrote it, and he talks about the need to be able to collaborate within differences. And how do we do that? How do we begin to hold our differences and learn to be able to have nobody be right or wrong? That nobody has to be the winner or the loser, that we can all, coexist. So, and we don't have to all agree. We're never going to agree here, right? I mean, we're not going to prove them wrong, they're not going to prove us wrong, it's not going to happen. So, but what the key is going to be is a mutual clarity and respect on both sides for there to be any kind of harmony. So, and this is, somebody has said to me, well, you have to sit down and talk to the Sufis about this. And it's like, well, first of all, I just want to say, I don't have to do that, but we as a community have to do that, I think. But before we can do that, and I think that would be ultimately a very important thing to do, but I think before we can do that, we have to agree upon what it is we would be even, coming to the table with. I mean, what is it we're asking? Where do our boundaries lie? Where does something crossing over create uncomfortableness or conflict of interest? I mean, we probably all have thoughts about that, but as a community, I think that's what we have to begin to define. So I've made just we kind of sat down since I've been here thinking about what is the difference between these two paths. And should we want to take the visual up? But so we came up with the direct path as being unstructured versus the intermediary path being structured. And see, when we look at the direct path, there's some challenges here for us, in how to go forward. It's non-formalized. There's no obvious external form. There's individual personal relationship with Baba. There's no group doctrine. And then developing intuition as our internal guide. Whereas the intermediary approach is structured, formalized, there's group consensus, there's obvious external form, there's agreed upon organized set of beliefs, and it relies on external guidance. So how do we, begin to make sense of these differences and find a way to, to get along?
Alisa? Just a point of clarification, when you say intermediate approach, are you referring, for example, to Sufism Re-Oriented as an intermediate?
The intermediary approach, did you say? I'm sorry?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, it doesn't necessarily, it's not just Sufism Re-Oriented alone, obviously, but that's one example of an intermediary approach. Yeah, but I think this is true, because I see Sufism Re-Oriented as one, offshoot for the first, but I think there's probably going to be many others in the future, I would imagine, I don't necessarily think that would be the only one.
You have to clarify that you mean that path requires an intermediary to Meher Baba. So intermediate is a little ambiguous because it could be intermediate and then there's something else. I think that's what Dennis is questioning. You mean a path that requires an intermediate, a spiritual intermediate?
To intermediary to Baba.
Yeah.
Yes. When we're talking under Baba's umbrella, yes.
Right.
I'm not talking about generalized religions. I'm talking about Baba, the Baba world. So, and we wrote these down. And like at the break, there may be more that people can think of. There's some markers here you can add, because this is all part of what I think we have to start thinking about, as a community. So feel free to add if you can think of any other differences there. So how do we accomplish breaking through these polarities and finding paths to coexistence. It's first with our community to work and define and clarify where our boundaries are that need to be respected through open conversations. And I think that's part of what I'm trying to do today, is open this up so it becomes something that can be talked about and doesn't feel so scary to talk about. That's what we did in Berkeley, and I tell you, the conference really served that purpose. It was, I mean, we still have a lot of work to do, don't get me wrong, but it just took, people felt so much relief. It was really, there was a lot of relief, and there was a lot of healing that came from it. So I believe going toward conflict is a good thing. Then open conversations with the Sufis can begin maybe eventually. Again, mutual acceptance and respect will be key, and both sides must see how they contribute to the problem. Because right now there seems to be I have noticed that there's this idea that somehow Baba people are the ones that are judging, or Baba people are the ones that are, somehow, doing the bad stuff. And my experience in just even in doing the conference and in talking to a lot of people about this issue, is it just like with any conflict or opposition, there's two sides. And there are two very strong, there are a lot of people who feel, where do Baba people feel offended? Where do the Sufis feel offended? Where, in order for this to really break through, there has to be a willingness on both sides to acknowledge how they are contributing to this and what can be done different. It's not just one side changing, it's both sides having to find the boundaries and agree to them. So for us as a community, how do we begin to define the direct path? How do we begin to take the focus off of what the Sufis are doing and put it back onto what we are doing and what we need to be focusing on? And to me, that's where it's really important. I think this has importance for any new Baba lovers in the future, that there be some sense of what it is we're doing on this direct path, what it means to be on the direct path, as well as with the Sufis and any future sects that form. Not to create another religion. I don't even know if it's possible not to create another religion, but certainly that's a goal. But to hold true to the directives that Baba has given us to keep hold of him. How do we hold true to those directives that Baba has given us? And then, and I talked about the Ivy Deuce. So my understandings is this path, being on the direct path with Meher Baba, is an immense blessing of the priceless gift of becoming his intimate companion. It's earned, but not guaranteed. It's up to us. We have to make that effort. We don't just get to hold on to Baba no matter what we do or don't do. It's a path of intuition, obedience, surrender, and effacement to his wish and will. There really is no outside authority. Baba is our inner authority. There's nothing to gain and everything to lose. We must become dust at his feet. Each one has the gift of unique personal relationship with him. There is a freedom in choosing and interpreting this path. That's a really important key, that I think that each one is able to choose and interpret this path as they want, because we all have our own unique individual relationship with Meher Baba. He speaks through our daily lives. How do we follow him? What does that mean to follow him? He left a treasure trove for us to mine in finding our relationship to him and his pleasure. There really is nowhere else to look. Baba says, I am never silent. I speak eternally. The voice that is heard deep within the soul is my voice, the voice of intuition, of guidance. Through those who are receptive to this voice, I speak. I think that's a really key thing for those who are receptive. Again, our efforts. He can be speaking to us, but if we're not receptive, we're missing. Now, our efforts, as I understand them, are to learn to listen for and to trust the voice of intuition as his voice within, cultivating our own inner life. Be determined to be his, to love and obey his directives given to us directly without the need of an intermediary. I mean, that's a big difference between the direct and indirect path. On the indirect path, we are giving over our authority to somebody else to tell us what to do. With Baba, it's up to us to find that and to listen to that within. Not to worry and to learn to trust him and draw ever closer to him, to take his words seriously and ourselves lightly, to be natural and approach him from the heart, to repeat his name as our sole practice throughout our daily lives, and to take his name at our last breath. These are all things Baba has told us. So how do we begin to compile these things and have them so we could, remember them and rely on them to guide us? And I just put this in here because one of the things that Baba said to Robert at the end when he was leaving, because Robert had every intention to go after meeting Baba, to go up to the Himalayas and meet rishis and saints and bring in the new year up in the Himalayas. And Baba had said to him, and he didn't know that Robert was going to do that, but he had said to him, to go straight home, that there was no need to seek out rishis and saints now that you have found me. I am God, and my word is truth. And that impressed me quite a bit when I was married to Robert, because Robert took that as an order, and he never ever looked at anything related to any other kind of saint and so I was very impressed by that as a come relatively newer to Baba when I met Robert. And I want to end this part here reading a circular. I gave this in the handout, but I wanted to read it out, that Erich had written a circular in November of 1980 after this whole meetings with the Sufis had occurred. He wrote this circular, and I think to me his words speak so potently of the direct path. And he says, "Our love for the God-man is the response to the greater love which he has for us. Through lifetimes of striving, longing, and seeking comes the rare opportunity for a few to accept the advent of the God-man, while millions upon millions are yet unaware of the expected one has come again as Avatar Meher Baba. What untold fortune is our inheritance that beloved Meher Baba has drawn us to him, closer and yet closer into the orbit of his love. Again and again, for our highest benefit, beloved Meher Baba cautioned his lovers against running after yogis, gurus, saints, or visiting their ashrams and shrines, as there is no longer any need for these pursuits. Avatar Meher Baba was and is the living God, and he is the one who is the fountainhead of grace. He is eternally the way and the goal at one and the same time for his lovers." And finally, Baba says, "I am the ocean of love. Draw as much of this love as possible. Make the most of this opportunity. It rests with you to draw as much love as you can out of the ocean. It does not rest with me to explain how you should love me. I want to give you my love. It depends on each of you to receive it." So, again, I want to really stress that the importance of us defining this path and holding it strong for, against whatever narratives are out there is, I think, one of the most important pieces of this work with the oppositions, because maybe it is through that opposition of what's going on there and what they're saying and how do we create boundaries that we are actually going to come to define ourselves more and more. Let's take a break. That's my part of the presentation. And yes, Wendy?
May I share something with you very quickly?
Yes.
I'm so happy you mentioned the umbrella, because I was there in 1962. I was 11 years old, but I'll never forget the image of Baba holding the umbrella, because when I was a little girl here, Baba did that to me. "Do you want to come and hold the umbrella?" You went like this, "Come hold the umbrella for me." So I'll never forget that gesture in 62. And Baba did say, he said, and he started spinning it. This is the gesture for umbrella. And he started spinning it, and he said, he did say it'll be spinning faster and faster, and some of you will fall away. The drops on the outer edge will fall away, and he added, it will seem natural. So that was interesting. And then he looked around the room and he said, some of you in this room will fall away. So it was a very serious moment. Then he also, as you mentioned in your talk, he, right after that, picked up the hem of his garment and held it with both hands and said, hold on to my daman with both hands and hold tightly. Do not let go. And even if one hand lets go, you will still have the other hand on my daman.
Yeah.
Thank you, Wendy. And I want to say that I realized how, like, no matter how strong of a hold we have to be ever vigilant because we are so vulnerable to losing hold. I really came so deeply to see that through the conference. Like, it was sort of shocking to me because I just never thought that. But I tell you, we have to now start to pay attention to Baba's directives to us, because without us even knowing, we can lose hold of him. So that's one of the main things I feel is important for all of us to get to know. And the resonating bell of warning, I feel, was more about that than anything else. So, okay, well, I'm gonna say let's take a break, and what I would like to do when I come back is answer any questions and, like, hopefully hear some people's thoughts and feelings about this, because I think, and I have generated some questions that I would like to talk about as going forward that, you know, can be considered in this community. So.
I'm going to, one of the options that you have, and I'm, as a strong believer in this, I'm going to pass another can, but this isn't for money. This is for you, those index cards. Many people do not necessarily, they want to ask a really pointed question, but they're not comfortable asking it when they're identifiable. And since the purpose here, I think, is to get to the truth and how people feel,
to invite people to
please
be
drop
honest.
your card into the can. You will be anonymous, and your question then can be answered as you ask it without any fear. Okay? Thank you very much.
Welcome back. I also want to start out with a disclaimer that I may not have the answers to all your questions. And I also invite, for any question asked, I would invite anybody to answer too. I'm not, you know, the only one answering questions too. Because, I mean, the whole goal is that you guys as a community start to talk to each other, so.
Oh, we never talk to each other.
Huh?
We don't talk to each other.
I know, well, this is not a good thing. We didn't either in the Bay Area, trust me. So, okay, so Jai Baba, is everybody ready to start?
We're ready.
Okay, so I guess a couple of things. I just want to start out with a couple ground rules about, you know, if we start a conversation. I'd like to ask that people do their best to listen to what people are saying, no interrupting. Try to use I statements wherever possible, and avoid statements like we or you. So really express your own feelings about whatever you're talking about. And also that be mindful of time. We have quite a few people here, and I think people, you know, a lot of people may want to say something, so try to keep your questions a little bit more brief in what you're saying. Okay, Jai Baba.
I've always been interested in the whole history of Sufism Re-Oriented. For whatever reason, it always galvanized me from the first. I started hearing about it early on to my becoming connected to Meher Baba consciously in September '67. I read what was available at that point, a couple of the pamphlets that had been put out by the Sufis, and I was very interested in it all. And then when I got to read Nikon's stuff, that was very meaningful to me. When I went to India in '74, I happened to ask Adi Kairani about those very questions that you're bringing up, about the history of the charter and all that. And I asked him, to tell me about what he understood about this whole issue of Ivy approaching Mayor Baba and asking for the boon of an unbroken succession of illumined Sufi saints. Now, I remember at that time it was said that it was fifth plane and over. Somehow it seems to have changed to sixth plane over, but that's a minor point, whether it's fifth plane or sixth plane. But whatever. And what he told me is that Mayor Baba told Ivy, don't ask me that. You have my Nazar and my blessings and the charter. There's no need for that. And Ivy persisted. And Baba said, please, there's no need for that, don't ask me. And Ivy persisted. And Baba finally said, do you know what you're asking me to do? You're asking me to cut off my head and put it in a platter. And Ivy said, yes, but please do so. Well, I'm exaggerating a little, but she still persisted. And so Baba said, okay, I agree that from now on there'll be an unbroken chain until I come back of at least fifth plane, which I understood, but could have been sixth plane.
He actually didn't say that.
Well, this is what I was told that
Well, that's
Baba
what I
said.
was-
But then when she left the room, Erich was there at the time, and Ali had spoken to Erich, and he told me that Mayor Baba communicated, of course, non-verbally, that Erich said Baba looked more pissed, more angry than he ever seen him, and he said, I've given the lady what she wants. And Erich said she never, and Ali told me, he never saw Mayor Baba more angry in his entire life. Baba was not pleased at all, and as you know, Baba was what he called bolo. If you pressed him, he would give you what you asked for, but it didn't mean that it would work out okay. Like with Charmian's first wedding, Baba did not give approval, and she insisted, and it was a disaster of a wedding. So this is how I understand. I know there are different versions running around in the legacy, but what I heard is that Baba did agree to it, but against his will.
Okay, so are you just making a statement, you don't have a question?
That's it, yeah. That's
Okay,
like this.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else?
I do.
Okay, Pamela.
I'll reach into the bucket. I feel that Baba's last message on the alphabet board is so relevant, because I think one of the concerns that I've heard expressed is, well, Baba's not in the body, and the Mandali are no longer here, and so, you know, we need a teacher. We need someone, an external figure, to guide us. But I think Baba was so absolutely clear, and I'm just going to read, if it's okay, a few things from that. I looked it up.
Can you speak loudly too?
Yes.
I mean,
Do you want me to, should I come up there?
Yeah, you can, if anybody wants to come up to the mic, feel free.
Baba said, this was October 7th, 1954, and his last message on the alphabet board, saying, there is no reason at all for any of you to worry. Baba was, Baba is, and Baba will also be eternally existent. Severance of external relations does not mean the termination of internal connections. It was only for establishing the internal connections that the external contacts have been maintained till now. The time has now come for being bound in the chain of internal connections. Hence, external contact is no longer necessary. It is possible to establish the internal link by obeying Baba's orders. I give you all my blessings for strengthening these internal links. I am always with you, and I am not away from you. I was, am, and will remain eternally with you, and it is for promoting this realization that I have severed external contact. This will enable all persons to realize truth by being bound to each other with internal links. And there's more, but I just feel like that is such a key part, and the piece about being bound to each other through the internal links, I think is a clue for us in terms of carrying on and listening to Baba's words. And, you know, and the quote that you had put up there earlier, the one about, do you remember the one?
Which one?
The, those who are, through those who are receptive.
Oh, the I am silent.
Yeah. I speak eternally. I'm never silent, I speak eternally. And through those who are receptive, you know,
To this voice.
to this voice, to my voice within, I speak. And so I feel like we have a responsibility to each other too, to uphold Baba
To help each other.
in the best way we can, to really help one another to feel his presence. So that's
Jay Baba, thank you.
Yeah, one of the things that came up in sort of conversations over the time I've been here is just around the need, and somebody just mentioned it here at the break, is the need maybe for somebody to compile all of Baba's directives into one book, that is available for new Baba lovers or people, or even all of us, to have in one place, like all the things that Baba told us about the direct path, about following him directly, about approaching him directly, that we can have as like sort of a way to refer to these things, because it's easy for us to forget them, I've noticed.
I'd like to.
Can you say your name too? Because I'm not familiar with all of you here, so.
Stephen
Stephen.
Tischler. In your presentation, it sounded like Sufi's main outlook is not towards Baba, but towards an external intermediary. I bet you can never find one Sufi to agree with them. Is this what you're holding by? That that Baba is not the true guide, and that the Murshid is if there's perplexion, people are perplexed, then they could get guidance. I'd like you to clarify that.
Okay, well, I just want to clarify something that you just said. I'm not part of a group, and I don't, I think, like I said, everything that I'm saying sort of represents my own thinking, and I think that, some of the things I'm saying a lot of people agree to, so I want to kind of get away from the mentality of like a group, us against them kind of deal.
Oh,
I
didn't mean that.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I hear that, and I just say that because I think that's part of what we're trying to move away from. But, so what I hear your question to be is, am I saying, or is anybody who's talking about these issues referring to the fact that the Sufis are not following Baba, that they're following somebody else and not taking direction from Baba? Is that what? Is that?
Yeah, it wasn't clear to me. If I was a Sufi and I heard what you were saying, I'd be pissed. I really,
Which part? Can you say what?
Yeah, because the reliance, almost like you were saying, there's an exclusive reliance on the Murshid, as opposed to the main focus is Baba, and the Murshid is there as a fallback, as a...
It's on that chart just behind you, Steve, the differences, the intermediate approach.
Yeah, but behind you.
Intermediary, excuse me.
Yeah.
There's something there about...
The intermediate approach is a structured, formalized group, obvious external form, agreed upon organized set of beliefs, and relying on external guidance. So I hear what you're saying, and I do think that's a common, thought people have. I personally I've not been a Sufi, so I couldn't really say how the Sufis take Baba or versus their Murshida. I don't personally know that. Maybe somebody here might have more insight into that. I just know the difference between following Baba directly and having somebody that you are looking to for guidance is a difference. And I'm not making a judgment about that difference, it's just pointing it out.
I have spent some time with some of the Sufis and some of the community activities, and I can speak pretty loud. I think everybody can hear me. I understand what Steve's saying, and I also understand just my perception of my experience with some of the Sufi community has been very intimate, loving relationships with Baba. The people that I know and my experience is all that I can speak of. And at the same time, to me, my reference was always, I grew up here and knew of Baba when I was 14. So being an adolescent Baba lover, I like to think of myself, and still somewhat adolescent, I might add. The picture that I've always gotten from the people that I've been around, and being even in with Murchida Carol a couple of times, it's just been very similar to my experience with Elizabeth, my experience with Kitty. You know, somebody telling me back then, no, you can't wear that necklace to the high school. You know, these are the things that we do and we don't do. But never any level of, what I'm hearing here is confusing me completely. This separation between Baba and me, or Baba and the Sufi followers that I know. You know, and granted, I've missed this argument, this fight, this opposition thing in my life, and I am grateful to Baba for that. But, you know, somehow I bypassed it all and didn't get it. I guess I didn't do enough trips to India. So, but I'm thinking that that's not where I've never seen this level of that separates me from God thing. I mean, I was just telling someone, it's like, you know, there may be Catholics who worship the Pope, but most Catholics know that the Pope is not God, okay? Even if they listen to what the Pope says, they get that the Pope is not God, and that the Pope is not God's you know, but he's elected by, you know, and that's what does it. So that's just all I needed to.
What you're sharing brings to mind a conversation that I had in the original kitchen one night when I was on duty, caretaking duty, and I was with Mark Carr, and there was a guest, a visitor who was staying on center, and we were talking to him, and Mark Carr has a way of sort of drawing people out, you know. So it was revealed that this man was a Sufi, and he had been connected with Mackay. And Markar asked him, well, what was that like? And he started talking about it. And then he said, you have no idea how beneficial it is to be under the direct daily guidance of a perfect master. He was talking about Mackay. So that is, I see, is a danger.
So I think the issue, I'm sorry, what's your name?
Pat.
Pat. Hi, Pat. I think the issue that Pat is addressing is again, what I sort of believe I would like to see and hope that we could move past is evaluating and judging what they're doing, because that is kind of not really what I'm talking about. I'm not saying it's not what anybody's talking about, but it's certainly not what I'm talking about, because again, I'm not a Sufi. I have no idea what they are doing in terms of how they see their murshid or what their relationship was with Baba. Frankly, that's none of my business, because that's between them and Baba. But I think the real issue is, how does it pose a difference to where we are coming from on the direct path? No matter whether they take their murshid to be a perfect master, whether they take their murshid to be on the 5th plane, 6th plane, who knows? But the point is that they have somebody there that they're taking external guidance from creates a difference. And that's all that I'm trying to point out, that if we are going to be able to reduce some of the charge around this issue, get past all these polarities of good, bad, judgment, right, wrong, we have to just look at it as factual. This is just different than what, and why is it different? You know, we could even define that, because, you know, Baba has said, for those of us following him directly, there is no need for any intermediary, no matter who that intermediary is. So that's where, you know, so I'm just trying to point out the fact that we have to just be able to get to a place, I believe, where we could just name that and say, this is a difference, and what do we do about this difference? How do we create, this is what I have here, how do we move from defining and defending differences versus embracing oneness, to defining and acknowledging differences and embracing oneness? How do we hold both of those things where we are under Baba's umbrella? I mean, I know many Sufis. I've lived among them for 30-something years now, and I can say I think they're lovely people. I don't have any personal issues with anybody. I don't know that many of them because they do stay to themselves more. But the truth is, it's not about who they are as people and what they're. It's like the Mandali embraced them and were loving and kind to them. It's just about a fact of a difference that is somehow very charged to talk about and gets into all kinds of assumptions. So I just want to say that in relationship to, and I don't know if anybody else has anything they want to say on that subject. Daniel?
I've lived amongst the Sufis in Washington for many, many years and went through the whole roller coaster of a lot of this stuff. So this is all very familiar territory, and it's clear to me, having lived amongst them like that or living alongside them, there are really big differences, whether they're just stylistic differences or substantive differences or what. There are clear differences. There's no question in my mind about that. I think for me, though, in this whole discussion, that there's something that seems to be predicated on an assumption that there's a problem here that's got to be reconciled. And so I'm asking myself, so what is the problem? Because we can start with this sort of live and let live attitude, right? We can sort of say, okay, well, they do their thing, we do our thing. I mean, in this room we have 40, 50 different people that live different lives with Baba. And we all, I assume we're trying to adopt a live and let live attitude about those differences. So the question is, what is it about this particular situation that creates an actual problem? So, for example, and I'll give you one or two examples of where I think there are actual problems, potentially. I think what you folks dealt with in Berkeley around the membership on the board, I think is a problem, personally. I think having people with a conflicting loyalty that they're on a board, when you're on a board, you should be able to act independently, and you should trust that everyone else on the board is an independent participant in that process. And if there's somebody there who you believe is taking direction from another source, they're no longer independent. So
Where are the conflicts of interest?
That is an example of what I would call a problem that actually does need to be addressed in one way or the other. And you guys chose not to go that way, but I personally agree that you were right to name it as a problem and try to solve it as a problem. I think there's some other potential problems, and I think the one, for example, that I think of is the Heartland Center, and Pamela and I have talked about that a lot. Pamela is the president now of the center. Is that there's going to be potentially interest on the Sufis on taking ownership over some of the sacred sites in Craig, Oklahoma, that would then be under their control. And the question is, do we as a Meher Baba community feel comfortable with that, or would we like to see the way in which they be controlled be different? That is another example of what I would call a problem. As a universal setting. And again, we can debate about that. I'm not trying to solve that problem here, but I'm saying those are actual problems. Beyond that, I guess I'm asking, and I ask you, Alisa, or anybody else here, where do you see other problems? Otherwise, the live and let live thing, sort of to me, it's like you said, Pat, fine, they're nice people. I know lots of them. Generally like that. So
thank you, Daniel. That's really well said, and I think that's what I've been trying to talk about when I talked about the differences that present conflicts of interest in collaborating. I think that those are the differences that we have to define, and I think ultimately, if we can sit down with the Sufis and say these are the places where we won't be able to collaborate, and these are the places where maybe we will. It's about that. That's the place that I'm coming from. It's about that. It's not about what they're doing versus what we're doing. It's more, and I saw that in the conference, it was about taking the focus off of that and putting the focus on defining what are we doing and what are our needs as a community, and where are the lines in the sand that need to be there so we don't get into an unhealthy blending that creates more problems than good. Okay, I'm just going to hold you because I want to see if anybody else, because we have so many people and time is of essence. So Okay, but thank you. I think that's the direction for you guys to be going in terms of a community, in terms of how you're going to be looking at this issue. So, did I see somebody's hand come up over here?
You, the bucket.
Hmm?
The bucket.
Oh, my bucket. Okay. Should I do it like raffle style? Who's the lucky one to get their question answered? Okay. If we are to be inclusive, does that mean all religions? That's an interesting question. I guess I'm not quite sure what that means in terms of inclusive. If we are to be inclusive, does that mean all religions? I mean, as far as I understand, and please anybody else answer this question, Baba had come for everybody. He'd come for all religions, and anybody was welcome. So I kind of feel like as a community, we are open to all religions. However, it's more looking at, again, where are those, are there any conflicts of interest in terms of, working together?
I have something to say on that front. I just noticed something the other day that someone had posted on Facebook, that there had been a book left at the refectory or the original kitchen by Osho, formerly Rajneesh, yes, and that was left in the kitchen for. I think that becomes the point. We can be open to all religions, but as a center, I know in Washington we had come to that decision as a group that our group existed for Meher Baba, and Meher Baba was who we did not welcome talks about or by some other spiritual teachers. So I don't know. I think it's just a matter of keeping clear on the mission of the particular space, and I think the center, the Meher Center, exists for people who know Baba, are drawn to Baba, want to know more, and
I think the essence is, and this is what I was kind of referring to too, is how do we on the direct approach preserve the universality of this path? Yes, Dennis?
Alisa, I'm very pleased that you've come, and I'm very respectful of the work that you've done. I am trying desperately to see a problem here, and I simply cannot see it. And I'm really trying very hard. And even
to see a problem related to what?
A problem with the fact that the Sufis are Sufis and worship Meher Baba in their way, with perhaps some guidance from the Murshid, I'm sure. And the fact that we have our Baba lovers and we worship Baba in our own way, and I guarantee, and you are quite correct, every single person sitting in the seat worships Baba differently, although we all, I am convinced, love Meher Baba with all of our heart. And I can't see a problem. I don't see it, and I don't even see, I don't see a threat, I don't see a difficulty, I don't see a problem. I understand, I've delved as you have into those letters, into the transcripts, and all the rest of it. And I can't, and I'm trying very, very hard to see it. I also believe, and this is always central to me because most of my life with Meher Baba has been spent without Baba Lover. And I came to Meher Baba very early. I've been to India once in my life, 1980, met all the Mandalay, even Adi Keirani. That was good enough for me. But almost all of my life has been Meher Baba and me. Changed a little bit since I've come down to Myrtle Beach. If Meher Baba calls you to the direct approach, Meher Baba will call you to the direct approach from now to eternity. If it is God's will that you follow Meher Baba as an aspirant directly, then Meher Baba will make sure that he chooses you and you follow him directly. If it, for some reason, is advantageous to you by the grace of God that you are in a more structured situation and setting to follow Meher Baba, like Sufism Re-Oriented, well, Meher Baba helped write the charter for Sufism Re-Oriented and approved it. But I don't see any tension with it. I really
Okay, well, I get that you don't, and I appreciate your perspective on that. And I don't know if anybody
Ken has a response.
yeah, Ken, I think if anybody has any response to that.
This is sort of a response, and you didn't go into it too much, although I think you touched on it briefly. It's really a bigger question in the future. It's not.
Well, I agree. I think this is more for future.
Sufism Re-Oriented, which is, from what I understand, will always be a relatively small group.
I've met a number of
You know,
people.
it's the 1,000 other Baba gurus that have popped up already, and will be popping up in
I've met
groups,
a number of
and how that all comes together. And I mean, in one sense, I'm sure there were a lot of Christians that were not part of any church, you know, but the people that organized write the history eventually. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really does come down to Baba's last warning, or Baba's many warnings to us as followers to beware.
In a sense, right. So this idea of the direct path and, you know, universality versus this sort of you know, maybe they won't say they're God realized, but they're advanced, or they're, you know, people are listening to them more. It's kind of, you know, so there are issues, I think, that are out there and that will be more and more prominent.
Yeah, well, the one thing, okay, Laura, I just want to say one thing, but Laura, you'll be next. The one thing that I would say that just came to me too as I was listening to you was the conflict of interest. I mean, to say something about what you said, a problem is the universality. I don't know if you know, when you think of universality, it means it's open to all are welcome. When the Sufis, I mean, I lived among them for 30-something years, and like I said, I've only been invited twice to their place, and that's not that I have begrudged that. That's their scene, but the thing is, it's not universal. It's you have to be a member. You have to participate in membership. So it becomes so. Like for example, with the Heartland Center, if they were to take control of the Heartland Center, or even Yupon Dunes, it's not universal. It becomes a Sufi place, and that is where there is a difference in terms of Baba's centers or Baba's things, because it suddenly then requires membership, and you have to be only there at certain times and invited. So that's one, just to say, to point out that is one thing that becomes really important in going forward.
To speak to Dennis's concern just briefly, Dennis, there are people, I've met many of them in my life who were Sufis or still are Sufis, who have reported significant solicitation of Baba people by Sufis to try to get them and enlist them by a certain pressure and influence. And Ben can speak to it directly because he experienced being solicited by the Sufis, he and his wife, by the Murshid and the Sufis, and I've met others. Ben will speak to you directly about it. They have a hegemonistic desire to take over much of the Baba community, and you're an ostrich with a head in the ground if you don't see it.
Okay, thank you.
I statements are good.
You what, Ben?
I statements are good.
Yeah, yes, I statements. Ben, you were referenced there, so can you speak?
Laura's turn.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, hold that, Ben. Laura, thank you. Thank you for being patient.
Well, it's been rumored. Now, I don't follow everything that closely, but that the Sufis seem to feel that they have the message that's going to be going forward in the future. Mm-hmm. And I find that especially a little bit not,
Troubling.
Yeah, troubling.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, I don't know how the Baba message is going to go forward, especially when he says,
that's the point.
I'll take everything away from you. I mean, I try to say, now how am I going to,
nothing to gain, everything to lose.
But, I mean, there must be a way that it will happen, and I think that that's the one thing that I just don't like to envision, is that would be the main Baba force going forward.
Well, it's possible that could happen if we didn't, as a direct path, have any sort of other kind of narrative going forward. That again, this is for future, not for now. I think we have to think forward thinking in terms of this.
issue, because it is possible that could happen if there's nothing else there as
So
time
that's
goes
why I
on.
don't feel that the blending or the sort of the sliding in, so to speak, is appropriate, either for the center or for any other organization that is the direct path, as you have pointed out so well. So.
Thank you. Does anybody else have thoughts on that? Okay, well, Ben is next, because he was referred to, so I wanted to.
So, just sort of in response to not what Ira said, but just to what Dennis said and what Pat, and kind of a combination of a few things here. And I'll try to keep it brief. I apologize if I rattle on a little bit too much here. But
Can you speak up a little bit, Ben?
excuse me. So, just sort of taking a step back here and looking at this in a slightly different view, and more of a geostrategic view here. I think one of the keys here is from, being, I think maybe Wendy is maybe the only one here that's a Baba kid, born into a Baba family. I look around, the Baba world is full of circles, trying to work stuff out. And I just want to say that I know lots of Sufis that became Baba lovers and Baba lovers that became Sufis. Kids that were Baba kids that became Sufis. They needed more structure, and they needed more discipline. They needed a parent that they didn't have. Their parents were hippy-dippies and, multiple affairs in this community and so forth. So they resented this community and wanted to find structure and discipline somewhere else in their life. And they found that. So I don't think, I mean, we talk about how God touches our heart. I don't think that's the discussion to have. I think people find that, in different ways. I think the live and let live, okay, fine. But from a practical component, you have two communities with diminishing returns, is what I want to say. The one has a big nugget to prop up financially, and that's Sufism Re-Oriented, and then there's the Baba community, which has a slightly different nugget to prop up.
What nugget is that?
Huh?
What nugget is that?
Usually being able to get out of bed in the morning.
You'll afford it.
I thought you were going to make an appeal for funds for the circle.
Well, this is where I'm headed. This is where I'm headed. So, but out of that, if we look at history and we look at the way that civilization has existed, when one has a big nugget, as Sufism Reoriented does, and then they have the sort of archetype that they're falling under right now, you can see a trajectory. It's not hard to see a trajectory where they may have to be more recruiting. They just don't have the numbers. They don't have the young people in their organization. They don't have the financial numbers, and that's a whole other conversation to have.
Yeah.
But I think the conversation that we can have, and I think that one of the things where I see this going, and you put this in the direct approach, is what we can do with our youth, and how we can pass on wisdom. You see, cultures and civilizations survive because they pass on a tradition.
Yes.
I don't believe in the non-traditional approach. I believe that we need to pass on our traditions. We've outsourced that. And Baba kids, and I'll tell you this right now, Baba kids, forget about Sufism Reoriented. Most Baba kids don't know about Meher Baba. Okay? So the challenges that we're going to have to face are dramatic. Sufism, this discussion is one pillar amongst many pillars that are going to have to be addressed. So I like the concept of the legacy. I like this sort of being able to discuss. I wish there was more young people included in this. I think it's very important for these cultures to be passed on, these concepts, these ideas, these wisdoms to be passed on. And I would make one suggestion to both Wendy and Buzz, is that description of the umbrella is very, very powerful. And if that could be incorporated into the use of Habas, because young people don't know that. When you're 16 years old, you think, anything's,
You never lose hold of Baba.
You're going to never lose hold of Baba. And I think that's a very important thing for young people to hear, because we are losing, we've lost a lot of those people. And we've lost to other religions, to other things, and that's not necessarily bad. I'm just saying it's something that we're talking about being recruited by Sufism Re-Oriented. The younger generation is not rebelling against their parents necessarily. They're not breaking away from, Reform Judaism or Catholicism and going off and finding a guru in the East. That's not the paradigm that we're under right now. Baba kids are facing a different dynamic. So it's an interesting discussion to have. I don't want to take up too much time, but I just wanted to drop a couple seeds for you guys to think about.
Yeah, that's the
So.
kinds of
Can't you mention
discussions.
LA Tragedy? And Richie,
Buzz?
you told me about that.
Buzz?
That's good to hear. Maybe that would be the theme this year's.
I tell you, that title came to me from Baba, the umbrella.
Just make sure it's a rated period when you have it.
I'm sorry.
Can you hear me okay? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
I want to read something, a letter written in 1952 that Baba, through Adi K. Irani, wrote to Ivy Deuce about the relationship between Meir Center and Sufism. But before I do that, I just wanted to say that one of the important and telling things about Meir Center is that Baba wanted it to be universal. And he wanted it to be open to people who knew about him and wanted to know more, or who loved and followed him, without supplanting anyone's religious beliefs. So that means everybody's welcome, and that includes Sufis, and they always have been welcome with open arms. What it doesn't mean is that anybody can come on with their beliefs and try to proselytize about them, or try to convince others of them. That also doesn't happen at the center. So I think that's an amazing way that he framed Meir Center in the charter, is that it's completely universal and open to all people. So in 1952, this was after Meir Baba's first visit, and it's when, this is in July of 52. For the reasons stated in the letter, Adi wrote this to Ivy Dukes. Maybe I should use the microphone.
Yeah, I was
Can we face the...
Okay. What? All right.
Thanks, Sheila.
My dear Ivy, I'm writing you this by Baba's orders. In spite of the present state of health, Baba makes me read to him every day for half an hour the charter, I guess the Sufi charter, etc., that you sent him. He is going through it thoroughly because this has to be a real thing to last. Any flaw would mean defective construction of the whole. He finds many points perfect and many points needing correction. Also, to have it internationally established, he would like to complete it in India after seeing conditions in London, Egypt, and Asia. So he thinks the best for him would be to complete the charter with his signature in November and send it to you. So clearly they're working on the charter. There's stuff going back and forth. Meanwhile, from July 10th to November, you will have accomplished what Baba has ordered you to do personally. Don't know what that is. He will discuss all points with you and Don Stevens on 19th morning. He wants you not to worry about it at all, but leave it to him. Meanwhile, he wants you to note that, quote, Sufism Re-Oriented American Center has no direct connection with the Meir Center on the Lakes, Myrtle Beach. Meir Center on the Lakes, Myrtle Beach is not a Sufi, Vedantic, Buddhist, Christian, or Zoroastrian center. It is the Baba Center, based on universality. This Baba Center will have within it 4 different centers of devotion, service, renunciation, and knowledge. Sufism Re-Oriented American Center is to be in, let me get this right. Sufism Re-Oriented American Center is to be in any one part of America where Ivy Deuce and her co-workers can establish it, beginning with a small amount, the proceeds of the sale of the present Sufi Center property. Well, that's an interesting sentence, is to be in one part of America. Never mind. All right. This Sufism Re-Oriented American Center, of which Baba is the patron, will naturally and automatically have indirect connection with the Baba Center on the lakes at Myrtle Beach. It will thus be independent in itself, and yet have full support of Baba Center in every way. Baba wants you to know that he loves you and trusts you because he knows how deeply your faith in him is. Yours brotherly, Adi Sr.
So Buzz, what do you take away from that? What do you take away from that?
A lot. There's a lot said in there. And that Baba would have Adi specifically name out these different things: Vedantism, Buddhism, Sufism, but especially Sufism, to Ivy Deuce, who's establishing an order of Sufism through his direction, is what was said earlier, which is, Sufism Re-Oriented is not a universal path. It's its own thing. It's Sufism Re-Oriented, which is fine. I mean, Baba said, clearly Baba worked on this thing, clearly he set it up. There's disagreement about how he did it. There's disagreement about, the Murshidin, all that. But he did do it. And he could at any point in the 60s, let's say, call the whole thing off, right? But he didn't do that. And so the all-knowing one knew what the all-knowing one knows, which is this was going to happen. And he didn't stop it. I also take away from it that Mayor Center is meant by Baba to represent, and this goes to your point, Ben, to represent Mayor Baba to the world as truthfully and openly as possible. And it represents a lot of this here. I consider myself, I follow Mayor Baba. That's what I consider my life. I don't know about the distinctions. It will probably be more of the distinction about the direct path and all that. But I just feel like Mayor Center is, because of its universality, it welcomes all people. And so it has a bit more of the directness to it. In fact, it does have directness to it. It says Mayor Baba is available to all, through your heart. And more than that, he set up the center with a charge so that people could come and feel that. And people do. Miraculously, they do. And even with all of that said, he didn't stop Sufism. He didn't stop Buddhism. He didn't say Buddhists are wrong. He said, in fact, when people would ask him about that, he would tell people to follow the highest within their own religious tradition. So, and specifically, because there is a sense in the Meher Baba world outside the Sufi world, because of the tremendous amount of money that Sufis have, and seem to be spreading out, that somehow they could take over Meher Center. I've had that, a lot of people have asked me that. Do you think they'll ever take over Meher Center? And do they have ambitions to do that? And I have no idea. I've never talked to them about that. But Meher Baba makes it super clear. No connection. No formal connection. So I believe that it's the board's charge from now until the end of time that there be no connection, that it remain a universal center. I'm sure there are other things I can't remember.
In one place. That was
interesting that Baba had said to them, to the Sufis, that that their center would be in one place. And
Later on, he modified that and said they could be in a couple of cities.
Right.
So he was not exclusive. That was the initial thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And he also said about Meher Center, which you may or may not be aware of, that it could be
it could be in multiple places in South Carolina. It could be multiple places in the United States. Meher Center isn't incorporated is what exists. And this land is Meher Center, and Meher Center could have different centers anywhere.
Well, as I recall, Baba said at one time something to the effect of, wherever Ivy is, that's where Sufism is.
Oh, is that right?
And I think that's how I took that.
Okay. All right.
You know, I would just wanted to point out that when you were reading, it said with love, it seemed, I don't remember the exact words that you just read, Buzz, wait a second, that we are to have lovingness towards the Sufis. That's what I heard. Maybe I heard incorrectly. Could you read towards the end of what you read?
Full support.
Full support. Okay, so just for us to notice that, which I did. Could you read that sentence, please?
Sure. Sufism Re-Oriented American Center, of which Baba is the patron, will naturally and automatically have indirect connection with the Baba Center on the lakes at Myrtle Beach. It will thus be independent in itself and yet have full support of Meher Center in every way.
Yes. Just as a point of information, because you're on the board. Are you on the board?
Yes, I'm a non-voting.
Does the Sufi community have full support for the Mayor's Center?
I would say
it does, but I don't know.
Yes, I would say there's no divisiveness felt on the board about Sufism. I don't feel that there's any reason. I haven't actually really thought about that like that. All Sufis have always been welcome at Meher Center, and at the Youth Sahabas, ever since I think the first one, we had a bunch of Sufi kids, and we used to refer to them as the Sufi kids, and they came to us and say, "Please, just call us the Walnut Creek kids," because they didn't know if they were Sufis or not, and that was just our hang-up about it and our way of describing it. But Sufis come to the center quite regularly, and there's never been any, and never should there be any turning away of anybody, any Sufi, for any reason, unless they feel like they need to proselytize or they need to. And this I have also heard, which could be a problem, and that is that Meher Baba, in making this list, he said, in a different place, he said, I'm approachable through all of these. I think you had it here, through all of these isms.
The first quote, yeah.
And then directly, right?
For no ism at all.
And if any of the isms, including the directly, begins to say, by the way, ours is the best, this is the best way, this is the best way, if the Sufis say that, well, that's, I think, disobedient of Baba, because I think Baba is clearly saying that he is available directly. If the center were to say, oh, the only path to Meher Baba is this inner path of love and forget all about anybody else, I think that would be wrong. I think that it's completely up to every person to figure out their own path. I mean, that's my own personal point of view. I'm not sure I can speak for the center about that, but I can speak that there's no any animosity or any kind of feeling of negativity toward the Sufis on the board.
Yeah, thank you, Buzz. I just wanted to say one thing in that how I agree with Buzz in the sense that having lived in close proximity to the Sufi community for many, many, many years, pretty much most of my years as a Baba lover, I've never witnessed personally any Baba event or person being in any way unwelcoming to the Sufis. So for me it was confusing too, this whole idea that we didn't like the Sufis, like really? But I also want to say that during the conference, a woman named Lisa Greenstein has written up and she's going to continue to publish it hopefully into a booklet, the history between the Berkeley Baba community and the Sufi Baba community from the time of Ivy Deuce, and she does a presentation which you can see on YouTube. But the interesting thing, what I learned about that history, was that it was actually Ivy who pushed the Baba people away.
And, you know, and it, like she, at one point, the Baba people and the Sufis were sort of, you know, meeting together, holding group meetings together, and for a lot of years that was true. And then there was come a time toward the end, I think it was toward the late 70s, where she started to say the Baba people needed to, because I think there was, at least from a lot of people that I had heard stories where this is where a lot of people got hurt, because they felt judged by the Sufis as being somehow not as focused or less good Baba lovers. And so that was really interesting to me in the history, because I didn't know that at all. It always seemed like it was the opposite. So the roots go back, well, a lot of the feelings and the animosities had come from that time where they were told to make their own group, and that's how the first Baba League in Berkeley got formed. So, and they were sort of the Sufi rejects at the time. So that was sort of really interesting to me to learn that bit of history. So, you know, there's a lot here that still remains to be uncovered. Yeah. I guess, Keith, you were next. I think it was Keith and I'm sorry, what's Laura and then, yeah. Oh, okay, go ahead, Keith.
I just wanted to clarify why I brought up that incident of the man who was convinced through his personal experience that Mackay was a master, his personal master.
Perfect.
His personal perfect master. So it's not, he wasn't proselytizing, he was a sweet, kind, gentle man from every outward appearance. I had nothing against him being at the center, but my concern has to do with Baba's last warning. And if I could just read a couple sentences, I don't know if you read it already, but
I didn't read it.
Okay, a true Baba lover, this is Mayor Baba, a true Baba lover must remember the repeated warning given to all Baba lovers, time and again, to stay away from persons who feel and assert that they are masters and saints and possess powers to help human beings. His lovers and workers should never get involved with such persons and affairs, much less with perverted helpers of humanity who have no reverence or regard for the perfect masters and the avatar of the age. That's just part of it. So my concern is, and I feel it's my duty as a Baba lover, as someone who's had the guidance of Baba's mandali, not to try and convince him that, you know, he may be mistaken, but to have concern for someone who is seeking, you know, who's like trying to find a path and trying to find a way of integrating their Baba with their lives, to help them be aware of this warning and not be taken in by that kind of thing. That's my concern, and that's what I think the problem is.
I think that's what I came to see. Mani Arani says it really well when she was said at the end of that whole interaction with the Sufis. Mani had made the statement where she said that it was fine. They had let go of it. They had embraced the Sufis. But the one thing that Mani had continued to say, and she said, well, as long as the Sufis are taking their Murshida to be illumined, and I think this is the real distinction. It's not just a teacher, or to make reference to a priest, or even the mandali. It's when one is claiming illumination. She said that then represents where, Baba lovers should not be careful about being lured into that because of Baba's last warning about illumined murshids and saints. So I think the thing is about the illumination. As long as they are taking their murshid to be illumined, Baba lovers should be aware about getting involved in that if they are following Baba directly, if they take Baba to be the avatar. That was the one thing, and I think that's the distinction that feels really helped clarify things for me. It wasn't just having a guide or a teacher, it was one that's illumined, claiming illumination. Yeah,
so a lot of people are double dipping here. I think there are other people that want to share.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That word up there, intuition, is a really vitally important one. And that's what Baba's given us, in order to have our relationship with him.
Right.
And that comes from the heart, that intuition. And I don't need an intermediary in order to have that relationship with him. And I think that Baba's warnings about, all the poisonous mushrooms in the world, that we don't need to go there. And we can have our own direct relationship with him.
Correct, yes. Laura.
Okay, a couple things. First of all, I'm not a Sufi, but I've been around Sufis for, I'm not a Sufi, but I've been exposed to Sufi teachings and so on for the past years. And I have, first of all, I have a question that I put in the bucket. How do you structure an unstructured approach?
Maybe you don't.
Second of all, the Sufis do actually hold Yukon dues now.
Did you say what?
They own Yukon.
I assume so. I don't think yet, but I think so.
And Baba also gave them, I think, copyrights over God Speaks and various other materials. And I don't see that that's a problem. They make it available to everybody. I, like Dennis, I don't really see an issue here. And I would also point out, I'm not into perfect masters and saints and so on, but I would simply point out that perfect masters have a way of repelling people who are not meant to follow them. Like Upasani Maharaj and Gandhi, he dropped his loincloth and kissed Gandhi away. So I'm saying, how do we know who's a perfect master and who's not? And not that I'm going to follow one, but isn't that for their disciples to, isn't it that, it's between the master and the disciple, it's between, everybody's impressions are different.
Right. That's. Yeah, so you're asking me a question? I'm sorry.
I'm not really asking a question except how do we structure an unstructured approach?
Yeah. I mean, you make good points, and I think. Yeah, but I guess what I have taken to heart, I'm sorry, just this one, what I have taken to heart is like again, Mayor Johnny's presentation on Baba's last warning, I highly recommend anybody looking at that. That's a very, very potent presentation, but what I've taken away from this experience as I've grappled with this is that Baba had said that getting involved with masters, saints, and rishis can pose a danger to those on the direct path. It reminds me of when Robert had met Baba and, he had been taking drugs, and Baba had said to him that Robert, knew, that drugs were harmful physically and mentally, and who cares? But when Baba had said to him that the drugs were harmful spiritually, that was where Robert said, then all of a sudden I realized if Baba, who I take to be God in human form, is telling me that something poses a danger to me spiritually, I had better heed that. Because what do I know? And so that's how I feel in relationship to this. It's like Baba's given these repeated warnings, not just the last warning, repeated warnings about the dangers of getting involved. Whether they're illumined or not illumined, who knows? But if that poses a danger to somebody on the direct path, I believe if we are committed and not wanting to lose hold of him, we should heed that. That's all I've taken away from this, and that's all that I've come to share with you about it, is that I think that time has come for us to start to really take seriously Baba's words. So,
I wanted to say, the reason I asked Buzz to read that is because over the years, from very early on when I first came to Baba, which was in 1977, there has been all this fracas, in my experience, about the Sufis. And I'm not a Sufi. I don't ever want to be. I enjoy being with them. I highly admire
them and all the work they do. It's phenomenal work in this world. And so I asked Buzz to read that again because I hadn't heard that part before that I remember.
Right.
And what I would hope from discussions like this is that things have happened in the past that have caused a lot of dissension and upset, grief. You know, the Sufis going to the Manjali years ago when Mackay was the head of it. Really unhappy stuff, but I feel from comments I hear all the time from Baba people here in Myrtle Beach is this, and almost a vehemence against the Sufis that's underlined. The disparaging remarks and criticism and kind of, I don't even know what words because I hadn't pre-thought this. And I would hope I'm sorry I came late. Mara Meher is every Saturday afternoon, and I like to be consistent with that, so I didn't come. I wish I had.
So you didn't hear my presentation?
I didn't hear the beginning,
Yeah,
but I would just hope that
it had nothing to do with that, what you're saying.
It
just
had
so
what?
you know. It had nothing to do with what you're saying, disparaging comments and all of this.
Well, I hear it, a concept, I just heard it recently again, and to me as a Baba person who loves Baba but also respects other traditions, and I'm glad that I do, that I just would hope we would really take to heart what was read about full support and that they're distinct, and that who am I to criticize if somebody else is following another Baba person following someone else. If it's a new person, a young person, young in any way, they don't have to be young age-wise, coming to Baba, it would be really good to read or repeat about the final declaration or give cautionary remarks.
So can I make a request? Because I would love it if you saw the video, because we did video, and I would love for you to take a look at the video of my presentation when you get a chance.
But I'm just still hearing, I just wanted to say that to me, I wanted to stay away from the whole issue because it became so unpleasant that in our family, there's still, the worldwide Baba group, including, so that was what I wanted to say.
Thank you. And I wanted to call attention to this because this image came to me during preparing for this talk when I had a moment of getting a little shaky-kneed about it, and I was having a little feeling of like I wasn't going to do it. Baba had given me this image that I felt he really wanted me to bring forward, and even here I couldn't get markers, I couldn't get paper, and I just finally said, "Oh, forget that image. I don't have time." Then I went out to lunch with a friend, and she said, "Oh, I have a pad in my trunk and markers in my trunk." I was like, "Okay, I guess Baba wants me to have it." But so I just want to say that I think the goal for us in dealing with this issue is to go from defining and defending differences versus embracing oneness in Meher Baba, which we are kind of stuck in a little bit now, and it creates it's swirled around with conflict and misunderstanding, and it keeps us really stuck in a place of lack of safety, poor communication, polarization, superficiality. We kind of get locked in this, and we go round and round and round. And we need to sort of break through to where we're still defining and acknowledging differences and embracing oneness in Meher Baba. This is what I believe this is possible. But it really, and if we get to this place, it's based on mutual respect. The Sufis have to want this too. We have to be able to work together to create this defining of differences and decide as a community where we're coming from, so we could then have an interaction with them that would create a lot more safety, acceptance, protection, ease, open communication. So I feel like this is the direction that Baba wants us to move. This is my own personal feeling. And how to do that is what we're looking at this point. Alisa? Dan, okay, Dan.
So I want to link together a couple of comments. Ben's not here. First of all, I just want to say, I don't think, however we as a Baba community, however we conceptualize that, we should ever define ourselves in relationship to the Sufis. I think we define ourselves in relationship to Baba and only Baba.
Yes,
and
I agree.
I think that's number one. I think another thing that I want to get back to, there are a lot of references here to young people and to how tradition gets passed along or how we mentor people or like that. we live in the post-Mandali era, and that's really fundamental to me to this question, because even in this discussion here, so many of the references many of us have are back to the Mandala. And how did the Mandali mentor us and guide us and teach us and model for us what, quote, that direct way was? And that's not there. That's not there in their form. And my own observation, again, living amongst this a lot, is that and I can even speak internally, that when people are insecure about their relationship with Baba, that it's easy to look externally and say, oh, that looks really good. You know, and I think a lot of people have looked at the Sufis and say, they look really good, and they look more secure, and they look safer, and they look more together, or whatever it is, like that. And it's very easy to devolve to that, into that position, and to be that much more vulnerable to that world. And my question, and I guess if I had to frame it as a problem to be solved or a need, is what do we need to do, or what can be done to help create something that, some reference that people can have, either for themselves or to pass on like that really speaks to what do we feel is the path to Baba that he laid out for us. And I think that's the importance. To me, that's a central importance in what you put out. It's really helping to comb this information. And I don't know, it's just a book. I think it's also the responsibility that we all have as Baba lovers, is to be able to pass that on.
The internal links between us all to help each other in that, I think, is important. Yes.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to put out to everyone is get your feedback. Is it possible that Sufism Re-Oriented is the archetypical pattern for all the isms or all the beads on the string that that Baba has referred to, and how we, as let's say we, that small portion of humanity that somehow, some way recognized him, through him recognizing us, of course. That being said, and how do we hold open the space as these other isms eventually track in? It's a very interesting question. I just put that out here to open it up. That's
Oh yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, but I just want to acknowledge that's a very good question.
Okay.
I think that's a whole conversation in and of itself, but it's an important one. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I just want to say that I'm a little uncomfortable with all this talk about we, and I feel like my relationship to Baba is through me, and it's my personal responsibility every moment, every word, every breath, that it comes out with as much love as possible. And if I don't focus on that, I see again and again how I separate, I find ways to feel either rejected or to find a reason to reject somebody else. And I just think that that's the thing that we need to teach our kids.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing we need to keep focused on ourselves. That's what I need. And I don't know if people feel differently from that, but it doesn't matter who it is. I spent 1.5 years with the Sufis. It was very, very valuable time. I never felt like there was a moment that I would want to have missed, but I've spent years in this community, and it is an incredibly rich community. I mean, it's rich in much more diverse ways. It's more like,
What, the Baba Lover community?
Huh?
Which community are you referring to?
The Myrtle Beach community.
Oh, the Myrtle Beach community.
Yeah, so it's, they both have so much to offer, and I'm grateful for that, but I just feel like it's about our own personal relationship.
Well, that's what I just
Not an
posed a few
organizational
questions.
approach. Well, that's what.
Absolutely, I 100% agree with you. I thank you for sharing that. Mary?
When I was in Iran and I was like 12 years old or so, our contact with the West was basically, or Western Baba lovers, was through Farhad Shafa, who most of you know is Sufis. And he used to bring us Bob Brown's tape. So it was very...
He used to bring you
He used to bring us from America as a gift Bob Brown's...
Oh, Bob Brown.
Bob Brown's, tape. At that time it was tape. And we used to play, and then, Meher Baba is love, Meher Baba is love. This is how basically we got connected. And to my opinion, and then when I came here later, I had to get permission of God Speaks to translate to Farsi, and we already have the translation, which Dr. Mehdi Ghaffari has finished. But then I had to go through the Sufism and through Ira Dietrich and basically, get all this permission and all that. We also, I think there is nothing wrong with Sufism. There probably was a misunderstanding of someone who, in the Sufism, that says that I am a guru and he wasn't. So that's the illumination part of the Sufism is the problem that we all, as a Baba community, is dealing with. And for us, we got it, but for them, I think they still have to solve that issue between themselves. And I think there is already a shift of consciousness because of everything that brought up that in the Sufism community that perhaps Mr. Mackay was not an Ilu master, but he was a hypnotherapist. And for me, a master, thanks to Baba, I've been connected to some people in my life that they can read mind, but my understanding was he couldn't read mind, and so basically didn't have any status of higher plane of consciousness. Thank you.
Correct. Thank you very much, Marilush. That's well said.
Bobby had her.
Oh, Bobby, thank you for keeping track.
Thank you. And thank you so much for the courage to bring up these discussions. First of all, I think that Baba's last warning, I think when I did see a little bit of that on YouTube of that conference. I'm concerned that that last warning is being used, possibly could be used as something, let's say, against the Murshid Khan, or against Murshid Khan in a way of people, following her. And you mean as a Murshid. And every time that, like, she gave a talk here, and I've heard her talk at the center in Oklahoma, it's all been Baba, it's all been about Baba. So much love from her. So that's an individual Sufi issue of whether they're following, like that last warning. I think that's more for people that are outside of Sufism and, and some of these other masters coming along, but I really don't think that's an issue. My personal feeling, it's their issue, but it's not really an issue because Baba set up Sufism with immersion. And as I said, every time I've heard her speak or I've been in her presence, it's all Baba. It's all been about Baba. The other thing I wanted to say is I want to, as a former librarian, I want to just say that the book called Following Meher Baba by Rick Chapman, I think it's fantastic as a kind of a guidance for those of us who are on the direct path. So, and I highly recommend it. I was mentioning that last night.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't read that yet. I mean, can I just make one comment about what you said, Bobby? I do appreciate, what you're saying there, and I think the one comment that I would have in terms of just, and this is for me personally, and again, I have never met Carol Khan or any of the other Murshids, but I have read some of the things she's written, and when you say she speaks about Meher Baba, I would say the one place for me that crosses a line or feels uncomfortable is when I hear somebody who is seen to be on the sixth plane saying something about Meher Baba's advent that doesn't sit right with my heart. It's like, because see, if she's being seen as an illumined person, then her words have a certain power, which they do. There is like a way that, when she's talking about what the meaning of Meher Baba's accident, or what happened, what it means that Meher, that's a place for me that I don't want to like take that in to mean this is what it means, because even if she is on the sixth plane, which she may be, I don't believe that a person on the sixth plane knows anything of the avatar's purpose, because the difference between the sixth plane and the avatar is enormous. So I just want to say that I think, again, the focus becomes, in terms of what I'm trying to bring, the message that I'm trying to bring forward is, where are the conflicts of interest? Where are the places where, what they're doing and what they're saying and all that they're experiencing, where is it comfortable to have it blend with where we're coming from versus, they can say that over here and that's fine, but maybe not over here, like that kind of thing. So I think that's just what I want to bring out, because it's not about that she's not talking about Baba and all of that. I think she does, and I've heard she's a very lovely person. So it's just what she's talking about.
I just want to say one thing. It's like everyone in the Mandali had their own way of seeing things. If you spoke to Adi or you spoke to Bao, or they all had their way of seeing Baba and answering questions. You get different answers from each one. So if she has a certain point of view and people think she's a woman, well, that's their right. That's fine for them to take whatever she says is for that. I mean, I'm just saying it's not. I don't feel that we need to be concerned about her being wrong. Or that's. I mean.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. But thank you for that. Well, I just want to say that we are reaching the 5 o'clock hour, and I know that was the stopping point. I do believe this is a conversation, and I'm sorry I didn't even get to the questions in the bucket, but I would really hope that you all as a community continue these dialogues and these conversations, because this is the direction I think all Baba communities need to go, to grapple with this. And again, I want to reiterate that I really believe this is an important part of Baba's Advent. Just the way we're coming up against it and the way we're talking about it helps us get clarity. So he's using that friction. So I just want to end with a Baba quote, to end on Baba's words. I have not come to establish any cult, society, or organization, nor even to establish a new religion. The religion I will give teaches the knowledge of the one behind the many. The book which I will make people read is the book of the heart, which holds the key to the mystery of life. As for ritual, I shall teach humanity to discriminate, express, and live rather than utter it. I shall bring about a happy blending of the head and the heart. So, thank you all for coming. And
I just want to say that the third planer over there, Dennis Walter Ding.
Don't you even, I never said that.
He's not claiming any level of illumination.
I want you to know. Here's the truth. Can I say the truth?
Please do.
I love dogs, okay? I love dogs more than anything. And I'm hoping, number one, for dog consciousness, so that in the event that God is dyslexic.
God is what? Dyslexic. Oh, yeah.
People want to hang out and continue this. You have permission to do that, even though officially at 5 o'clock
I just want to allow people to leave if they need to, but feel free. People can stay on. I'm happy to stay on a little bit longer. And but I just wanted, for those of people who need to leave, I just wanted to end with an avatar. Meher Baba ki jai. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai.
Ladies and gentlemen.